and welcome to Lit with Love, where we bring you romance authors every month. I am Sonali Dev, and I'm here today with the very lovely Beth Kery, whom I've admired for a very long time. So welcome, Beth. Beth writes generally really sensual, erotic, but that kind of, sensually erotic contemporary romance that is very, I think, rich in texture and very deep in development as far as characters are concerned. So I think she spins the whole erotic romance stereotype on its head, as more and more romance authors are doing, but Beth does it absolutely beautifully and lushly. So welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And today we're going to be talking about her book, Behind the Curtain, which came out May 5th.
May 2nd.
5/2, so I'm math challenged. So, which came out this month, last week. And I mean, it's just, I think it epitomizes all the beauty and lyricism of your writing. And it is really interesting because you've kind of departed a little bit from the usual story. And I want you to talk a little bit about, and also thank you to the viewers for sending in questions, because as you can see on your screen, just below me is a little button that you can use to submit questions. And we had solicited questions before online, and we got a whole lot of questions. And some of them kind of steal my thunder because I already had those questions. But one question that a lot of readers had was where the idea for this book came from. So tell us a little about the book and then tell us a little bit about where that came from.
Okay. Well, Behind the Curtain itself is it's a contemporary romance that's told at two different time periods. In the beginning, it starts out when the couple is older and he runs into this woman who is singing at a nightclub, and she performs behind a curtain. And it's very sexy, and there's something about him that starts some alarms going, and then he realizes that it's his first love, the woman that he first fell in love with, Layla Barrick. And it flashes back in time to when they were 19 and 22, and it details them falling in love. The thing with their romance is that she comes from a fairly conservative Moroccan American family who do expect her to marry a Moroccan man. And Asher comes from a WASP family. And so there's the conflict there that Layla, who is very much involved with her family, loves her family. They're really her whole life, the atmosphere that she breathes. And so it's a struggle for her, and it does end a little tragically, but we fast forward into the future, and this couple gets their second chance. So,
thank heavens. And I think that's, for me personally, one of the reasons that this book felt so special is because you know how we have tropes in romance, and my favorite trope of all time is a second chance at first love.
Yeah,
so
I love it
this was
too.
completely my jam. I was like, oh my gosh. And we had a reader send in a question where she prefaced it by saying how she loved that you didn't just do it as backstory, but it's part of the story, and you did it in two timelines, and I really loved that too.
Right. It wasn't sometimes when you do that you get the point from the background, and then you go forward to and then you go back and forth. So it's done pretty much separately. So yeah, I love a second chance romance too. That was one of my, you had asked about the inspiration for the story. One of them, I know it sounds kind of corny, but I had revisited the Eric Siegel's love story, and I just bawled my eyes out. And I thought to myself, I really wanted to do something that was associated with somewhat with culture, but a lot with economic class or socioeconomic class that kept them apart. He came from a WASP family, and she was Catholic Italian, and but I didn't want it to end in tragedy. I wanted to have, a Romeo and Juliet type story that didn't end in tragedy, that ended with a happily ever after. That was really important to me. Also, I had read an article about a Saudi singer who lives in LA, and her name is, I want to say, Ratina. I'm going to saying her name wrong. I'm really sorry if she should see this, but it was a really big deal for her to sing in public. And I do have to say that wouldn't be the case for all Arab women, from what I understand. So, for instance, in Morocco, they love their music. And I think that wasn't so much the problem with Layla performing in public. It was the idea of her doing pretty sexy performances and somewhat the idea of doing it in public. And it's not very traditional for her.
Right, and that, I think you do that whole metaphor really well, right, about trying to be someone you're not for your family. And as somebody who comes from that kind of culture where you're not an island, where you're not, as much an individual as part of this network, this fabric, right? And so as an outsider, one tends to see that as very restrictive. And I'm not saying that it can't be restrictive, but it's not only restrictive, right? And I love that about Layla, that she actually loves that as much as she resists it, so that both push and pull, both those things were, I think, very well done.
Well, thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, and then I think also the being behind the curtain thing, and I think our readers should know that that she doesn't live her life behind the curtain.
Right.
It's just her relationship with public performance.
Right.
And I was going to save this question for later, but one of my favorite things about this book is how I love being surprised as a reader, because we read, our genre, has beats that we expect, and we love that familiarity. But when you're thrown off just a little bit, and I think that her relationship with the curtain, how he sees it,
right,
and where that goes. Why don't we just kind of go there now,
okay,
and talk a little bit about that, because I felt like I learned something almost from that little interaction. So,
yeah, well, they come from really different worlds, and that's one of the unique things about this couple. Asher comes from a world where, it's very, what I like to say, white cowboy culture, individuality. You see something, you go and get it. He sees this woman with terrific talent. She's a wonderful singer. She's a wonderful songwriter. And all he can think of is, oh my gosh, you're just like a star. You just need to shine. You just need to go out there and lay it all on the line. And because that's how he sees the world. That's how he would see success. And so part of their process is trying to understand that they're probably never going to be exactly like each other and see the world from that way. But I think Asher does start to understand that she isn't, just being, the word obedient to follow her, to follow her family, or that she really does know what she's doing. She wants to protect her identity. She has these different worlds that she exists in. She is independent, but she's also very much a part of the family matrix, and that's important to her. And it takes a lot for Asher to get there, I think, but he does. He gets there. He thinks the curtain means that she's shielding herself, right? That the veil means that she's cutting herself off and choking off who she is. But for her, the veil allows her to be who she is, to fully explore herself as an artist. So it's just a contrast. And
the fact that it's a choice that she's making, and I love that he changes, like in their arcs, he changes his mind and not her, because there's this whole white rescue scenario,
right,
where he's this cowboy who
right,
rides in and tells her how she's feeling.
This is how it should be.
Or oh honey, find yourself, and it's not quite that. In fact, what it is that she knows herself. He doesn't understand it, and he makes that journey toward understanding it. And I think that even as Asher, as a character, I mean, you say he is the cowboy and he's all those things, but I see him more as that boy who sees a hole in his own life and in his own culture, and he's always attracted to, you know, do something more matrixed and something more
It's true.
networked.
It's true.
Because this is a you know, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and he's a foreign correspondent, and he's attracted by foreign stories and all of that. So he is someone
Yes.
who's like that, and he's still, there's stuff he doesn't know, and she's able, you know.
Yes, she's just sort of a whole, all on her own, and you're right. I think that he is attracted to that from the very beginning. Yeah. You know, just because of my psychological background, I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm very aware that this is just one story that I told about a Moroccan American woman. I don't pretend that I'm an expert on it at all. But I did want to show the contrast between the two of them. I was a relational psychologist, so I was very much taught to look at women and women of different cultures, to recognize that the way that they show independence or the way that they show dependence is very different than what, you know, a white male culture might typify it as. So I took pains about it, and like I said, I'm sure it's not perfect, and I did make some errors probably, but I did the best I could.
Yeah, and we all do make errors, but I think that sensitivity is definitely, or was to me as a reader, visible. You know, definitely it was visible, and I also love how developed the secondary characters are, and what you were saying, that this is the story of Layla. You know, not all Moroccan women, but Layla. But there's Layla, and there's Tai, and there's Zara, and it's these three cousins, and they're very, very different women.
Yes.
And so it most certainly is, you know, Layla as an individual, but not all young Moroccan American women, because they're all three very different.
Absolutely.
So you know, what is, I mean, we'll step back and talk about process a little, because I mean, I want to know how you come up with these stories. Are you an outliner? Like what your process is, and then where secondary characters
Come
into that process.
You know, when people ask me about, you know, how much I outline or pantster or plotter stuff, I really feel like I fall in the middle, because there are certain points in the story or certain scenes that are very clear to me, but it takes me to write it to be able to kind of fill in the blanks, if that makes any sense. So it's different for every book, but for this book, for instance, I had a very vivid vision of that first scene where they see each other at the lake, and he like walks in. It's almost like he's like seeing, like, you know, a mythical creature. I mean, she's so beautiful to him. And I love that scene. So that was very vivid to me. And so, you know, then other things like just a general outline of the story that I wanted to write, just very general. And then for me, just the writing process itself is what helps me to create. So the writing, I might not save everything that I write, but it does help me to narrow down what I want to write, if that makes any sense. And then for the secondary characters, I did want to, especially for Layla, show some different contrasts of what other people in her family might be like, and to kind of point out the poignancy of what she was going through that you know, that summer, just that one summer when she meets Asher. And yeah, so Tahi is very like practical, and she's like, well, you know, sure, it's tough right now, but we'll get older and then we'll call all the shots, you know. And then Zara, I think, she may be acting out a little bit more, but she also, you know, has different longings and different things that she's struggling with. And maybe Layla's a little bit more straight-laced than she is, so that creates a different kind of contrast too. And then for the guys, I actually just, if I was going to do anything further, you know, like another book, I would want to do something probably with Jimmy, because he was kind of quiet and laid back in this, and he was an ally, kind of a secret ally to both Asher and to Layla. And believe it or not, Tahi, like, I'm thinking that something, because Tahi loves being with Rudy, but
Ginny's the one.
he's not the love of her life. So.
Oh, boo. But I do want to see Zara. I
Yes,
really
I
want to
think,
see
I've
Zara.
had a lot of readers tell me that. Like, they want to know what happened to her and how are things going to turn out for her. And yeah, it is it's a very sad, tragic situation what happened with her.
Yeah, and a lot of families use cautionary tales. I certainly grew up in one where you had that whole, oh, look how her life turned out for rebelling, and it just makes that journey toward Layla's own fight for freedom, so to speak, or finding herself, that much more hard when she's seen what happened to Zara and what it's done to her family. So
here she's so close with her family and loves her family, and the idea of being cut off from them is, like she says, it's like not being able to breathe. So it's very difficult.
Right, and yet valuing them so much because they're adorable, right? I mean, that whole the whole setup of the aunts and how they treat weddings and how they feel about dinners, the fact that they might just invite the mayor. I mean, I love that.
The fact that they're addicted to the soap operas. I got that idea from a Moroccan. Actually, she's Moroccan English. She says her mother and aunties are addicted to Arab soap operas, and we talked about how in Darija, which is the Moroccan dialect, that there's a lot of Spanish and French, and so I said, well, could she also get into like a Telemundo one? And she was like, yeah, and it's just something. I mean, I went and watched. Actually, I watched the Jewish Quarter, which is an Arab soap, and it's steamy and it's surprising, and it's really fun stuff. So yeah, I thought that was.
My mom is, and my aunts watch a lot of Indian soaps.
Okay.
But they've recently started watching a lot of Turkish soaps.
Okay.
Which I believe are like a big industry, and really, and the same thing, like super dramatic, very like all heart, all emotion. So very much. But I have to go and look at this one because the Turkish soaps were definitely on my to watch list. But yeah, just that lovely sense of community and how much it means to her comes across, I think, really, really well. And I'm looking forward to Zara's book. And I was.
You have me contracted before I'm ready. Yes, I would love to.
Contract her, please. And okay, so and you haven't traveled to.
I haven't been to Morocco. Okay. No.
Okay, because the sense of place. Now the book is takes place entirely in the United States.
Yes.
But I lived in Michigan for 12 years. So, I mean, it's just all around just a book of my heart because I lived in Michigan and it's set in Michigan. And I was telling Beth how, Arab food in Dearborn was such a part of living in Michigan.
Yes.
And the shoreline, we went every single summer and we camped there. So the book has this lovely sense of space, sense of place with both Michigan and Chicago.
Yes.
And so, talk a little bit about that.
Well, I agree with you. I just love the Michigan shore. I think a lot of people don't realize it's such a beautiful, idyllic place, with these gorgeous little small towns, and it's such a pretty place, and it actually is featured a lot in my books. It's in Glimmer and Glow, and it's my Home to Harbortown series. I'm mostly familiar with the Saugatuck Douglas area, but I also did Holland, Michigan once, and it's just such a pretty, place to think of doing like an idyllic summer, love thing. And then of course Chicago. I don't even want to say how long I've lived here, but right downtown. I mean, I'm just a Chicago girl, so.
And it totally shows. It totally shows. But also, I mean, if I could be young again and I could fall in love for the first time, I think, the Michigan shoreline would be a pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a lot of questions from readers. So thank you, readers, for doing this.
Thank you very much.
First. And so I'm going to try not to mess this up. So I don't know who this is from, but this reader wants to know when you were writing if there was anything about the characters that surprised you.
Well, It surprised me that Asher, well, I guess it didn't surprise me, but I couldn't, like you had mentioned earlier that you think Asher kind of came around to her way of thinking. I think that towards the end he's still struggling with it a little bit. You know, I mean, it's very hard to get rid of your mindset for your whole life. He loves her, he respects her, he does realize the strength at the end of the book that it's taken for her to manage these really different worlds, to maintain her privacy, you know, to not sort of be starved for fame or something. And so I think that he really did a great job as far as understanding her, but I do think that he still struggled sort of with his own, you know, values in regard to her success. So I think that he would say he understands her staying behind the curtain at this point, but he sure would like to see her out there shining.
Right, and I think that also that's not a full stop, right? I mean, when we write happily ever afters, it's kind of a comma, and you know, we know that it's, and
Right.
I do think that she herself is also in that place where she will, you know, she'll be figuring that out. And one of the things I loved about the book was that it wasn't neatly tied up completely, right? Her relationship with her family and where we leave off, there's a lot of, as readers, for us to kind of extrapolate, or, you know, for them as characters, where they're going to go. They stay more alive because they haven't, their life isn't over.
It's not all tied up in an ego, that's definitely for sure.
And I love that, I love that. All right, and I'm going to ask the readers, when you submit questions, if you could please identify yourselves and give us your names, because we have a giveaway. We have Beth's backlist and an audiobook of Make Me. So we're going to give that away to one of the question askers. That's that is a word too. So so please do identify yourselves. This reader wants to know if you do Pinterest boards.
Do I just in general do Pinterest boards,
For
or I
your
do it?
stories,
No,
for
I
characters?
don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah,
No,
no
I'm
kind of-
You know, it's so weird because in my mind I'm so visual, but using like visual cues like that to help me write never helps me. I don't know. I can't really explain it. When I'm writing the book, I think it comes out very visual, but things like pictures and things like that don't help me. Words do, but pictures don't. Are you like that? What do you like?
You know, so I was going to ask you if you have a visual image of Asher and of Leila.
Yes.
Like, so you do have.
I do.
You know how they ask you to dreamcast your books as movies.
Oh,
Who
see,
would it
but
be?
I'm not
No.
very good at that.
No.
See, I was going to say, I want the reader to be able to fill in the blanks.
Yes.
I really do.
Yes.
Actually, my hairstylist was asking me that because she was reading Glimmer, and she's like, who does Dylan look like? I'm like, I don't know. Who do you think he looks like? I'm such a psychologist asking that, but I don't know. I don't want to fill in the blanks for you.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And you asked me, and I like to have, I mean, I do collages and stuff like that.
You
but
do?
It's really, I do. But it's really interesting to me how people will generally assign the one Bollywood movie they've watched, the hero in it, to my hero, which is kind of interesting.
Oh,
but,
that is interesting.
But yeah, which is, you know, which is totally fine by me. Everyone in my books can look like Ranveer Singh, and I'll be okay with it.
Absolutely.
All right, so one of the most beautiful things, and you're right, one of the best scenes in this book is that first boom when he sees her. But you know, there's another scene that is absolutely spectacular.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, it's the scene where they're, you know, having sex on a train.
Yeah.
And it is magnificent, Beth. As I think a lot of the sex you write is, which is why I feel like it's almost so rich and emotional, you know, your erotic prose, for lack of a better word, and I absolutely love that scene because it's extremely hot, but there's so much heart in it, and so I'm sure you get asked all the time about your process for your, you know, sex scenes and how you know what your process for that is. Is there a process, or is
I
it
don't
just?
think there is a process. Okay. No, I mean, I'm right there with the characters. So in a scene like that, you have, you literally have this couple that is so in love. They haven't seen each other for 8 years. And they're it's like they're looking at each other and you're like, oh my God, you're right there, in the flesh. And it's this incredibly organic and raw emotion. And so I think that it just, hopefully if I'm telling the story correctly, then it flows correctly, the sex scenes. Just the tension level and the sense of longing. So
it flows more than correctly. It flows is absolutely right. And just for that scene, I think people should watch it. And now I want to ride that train. And I didn't. That was no pun intended.
Well, I liked it because there was a start and stop quality, right? Because and just they had so many halts on their romance, and just even in that 10 minutes or 15 minutes, from the Division Street L up to wherever they were at, Webster or something, I can't remember, but. You have to stop at different train stops, and so there's just a stop, and so it just increases the tension level.
Yes, definitely the tension for the readers too, because they're going like, oh no, please don't get into that. Please do not get into that.
Don't get on the train.
Move on, next door. All right, let's see. We have, so each one of these readers is saying, it's a great book, it's a great book.
Thank you.
So, very complex characters, and how do you develop them is something Joe, Susanna wanted to know, but we've talked about development, but do you want to?
Yeah. Well, I just think that's how I see people in general. I know that people are complex. I know that people are layered, and that their motivations come from a lot of different places. I mean, that's just how I see the world, I think.
Yeah, and it shows again. It's just absolutely spectacular. All right, one last question before we have to go, unfortunately, but we do get one question,
okay.
Although I'm having so much fun. Pamela Knight wants to know,
hi,
which of your books is your favorite, and do you have a favorite character?
It's the thing that all authors say. It's like, picking a favorite child or something. It's very hard. I do have to say that Layla really, I'm not just saying this because this book is out right now. I think Layla is one of my favorite heroines. I just ended up, I love her. I really do. I mean, I feel like I know her. She's very clear in my mind. So sometimes that just happens in a book. I don't know, the character is just so real for you. And then I would say Vic Savian from Wicked Vern. It was my first book for Berkeley, so it stands in my mind, and I don't know, he was just one of my favorite heroes.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on both counts, but definitely on Layla.
Yes.
She's absolutely lovely. Would love to be friends with her. It would be a little hard being friends with someone that gorgeous and that talented, but I think, she seems to have the right kind of soul. So, we'd forgive her.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'd forgive her.
We would forgive her after a while.
And I was going to ask you what you're reading right now, but one of the...
Well, you know what I'm reading? I'm reading The Bollywood Affair.
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
I'm further done than when I spoke to you at RT, and I feel really bad that I hadn't read you before, but you're a fantastic writer. And talk about rich, and I mean, you can practically just taste that book. It's so good.
Thank you, and we could do this all day, seriously. Thank you, and we won't tell them how much I paid you for that.
Oh, no.
But thanks.
No, that's the honest to goodness truth.
Thanks, Beth. What are you writing now, and is there a sequel? Because there better be a sequel, my dear.
I am not contracted for a sequel. It was written as a standalone, but that doesn't mean there won't be one. And just to throw everybody off, I actually am working on a psychological thriller with romantic elements in it. So,
but can Zara be the?
Well, I'll put Zara in there, exactly.
I'll be happy. I'll be happy. But thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you.
It's an
Delightful.
absolutely beautiful and delightful book, very much like Beth. You know, it's just the right amount of angst and beauty, and that scene on the train, which no one should miss. So thank you for writing beautiful books, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And now.